My name is Chris Johnson. I'm giving you my full breakdown. I'm Chris Johnson. I'm 34 years young, and I kicked off the Houndstooth just about 2 years ago when our former roommate Alana moved in, and yeah, we kind of just everyone who lived in the house was kind of down with putting on some house shows, and kind of couple people into music. Alana was more into dancing and the arts, and we kind of all just like agreed that we wanted to kick this space off. And yeah, it had been something that was on my mind for years. Vancouver's music scene's like pretty insular in some ways, where it's like there'll be like the garage rock scene, and it's like the garage rock bands play in like the garage rock venues and only open for the other bands that feel like that kind of vibe. But then every now and then you would see these spaces like the Anza Club, or like it's like the Australian New Zealand Club, and they'd like put on shows with a little more diverse bill that's just like, we're four bands of the same stature that maybe play totally different types of music, or seeing like bands that were friends with each other, that like maybe Dead Ghost plays like super garage rock stuff, and another band, Mode Modern, plays like very Joy Division-y stuff. But seeing them together, I'm like, this is an awesome double bill, because it's like, I just love good music. So seeing two great bands together is more exciting for me than seeing like, I'm only listening to one type of music tonight. I'm like, it's good if it's all good bands, and I love a well-curated night like that. But sometimes just like getting that spur of the moment, like, I have no idea what I'm going to get tonight, other than one band is my anchor tonight, but then I might see some crazy electronic music, or like something that's like a little quieter, or like, yeah, that's why I like to kind of keep people guessing with our bookings at the Houndstooth as well. It's like, you might get French clowns who are pregnant doing pratfalls in our living room and cracking whips in the backyard, or you might get like crazy scary art all around our living room, or you might just get some straight up rock and roll. So, yeah.
Great. And it would be really lovely to hear some of what you do here, some of that programming,
Yeah.
and how it came to be that, from what you were seeing as someone going to all of these gigs, how did that lead to having much more diversity, you could say, here?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's been on my mind, because like, being a black musician who doesn't play like typically black kind of music, like, I feel like typically people expect you to play some more like reggae or hip hop influence sort of stuff. So like, the fact that I'm not playing a classically quote unquote super black music, it made it like, I don't know, it's not like there was like the perfect venue set up for me to play in, where it's like there was like these very clear spaces where it's like, there's places that support black artists in Vancouver, and it's like really good spaces. There's like the Black Block Party and stuff, and then there's like kind of like the rock scene, but trying to make a space that kind of fills in the gap of like these in-between spaces, where I'm like, yeah, we're like, I consciously think about trying to program different people here. So we've had like trans performers at multiple shows, Asian performers as like lead singers and dancers, artists, and like, trying to find other black performers as well. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of like trying to tap all the talent I've been surrounded with, and like just meeting people through working odd jobs. It's like, I feel like I've known so many people with different artistic backgrounds that may not have had like a place to show their work. Like, my friend Marshall had like the really cool spooky art that was up when you came to a show here, and it's like, that's like, I think his art is really incredible, but it's like, that's like his second exhibition, and the first one was here. So I'm like, the fact that I get to like help someone show off what I actually stand by is like really cool, interesting artwork, is like, that's what gets me excited to like bring people into this house, and like try and put some money into the artist's hands as well, because I know that's definitely like hard to do when you're starting out as a musician or artist or dancer. It's like, I don't know, making $100 off a house show is like, it's not a not a king's ransom, but it's like, it's definitely something to help like build up those muscles and like get you in front of like a crowd of people who it's like might not normally venture to like the space that would normally house this, like the normal little niche. It's like, I don't know if I'd be making it out to a weird scary art gallery night necessarily on a normal Saturday night, but it's like mixed with some bands and stuff like that. I'm hoping we can attract people and open them to some new stuff. Yeah.
What intentions do you have for the audiences who come to your space? Do you have intention for them?
I definitely try and make it like a welcoming space for like sober people or like people of all walks of life, and just try to promote like a positive vibe. Like, I think in all the shows we put on in like a couple years, there's been like one asshole, one straight up asshole who was like, at the end of the night, we had to kick him out. And then there was one other person who it's like, we were like, is this person going to be a problem? And then we started doing karaoke and like kind of encouraged them to get on the mic. And then it was just like, oh no, you're like ingrained in the space. And it was just like, okay, I know nothing untoward's going to happen now. So it's just like, yeah, I feel like having that intentionality and like, especially in kind of an underground space, I think early on we were like very cautious in being like, it was almost like invitation only, or like it kind of has expanded out from that as just like a word of mouth. Like, it's like friends and friends of friends, and every now and then we'll like put the address online for a day or two and just be like, if you're really into this kind of music, you can like come see. So it's kind of like, yeah, trying to make it a safe space through careful curation. Although, yeah, now we've definitely been getting more and more like, I've never met you and I don't know who you know, but like, happy you're here. And like, most people are really good about like paying the door entry without me having to like hassle them and stuff like that. So it's, yeah, it's nice that like, I think the intentionality when I speak to the bands and to get them to invite their friends, I think a lot of them are sending the right message. Whereas like, yeah, I think it's been quite rare when like a band is kind of like tried to big time the bookings. I'd say that more so happened with one musician Alana booked, where it was just like they were shitty about like replying and showing up to meetings and stuff like that. Whereas like I feel like almost every other band, it's like if we're like, oh, we want to meet beforehand, they're like super receptive. Or if it's just like, hey, show up at this time, we'll throw you some cash at the doors before you leave. And like, yeah, I feel like it's been a really positive experience. And I didn't know for sure. We definitely didn't take it for granted at first. It was kind of like, let's get every homie we know here so that if a ton of randoms show up, we can kind of outweigh them by friends. But yeah, I feel like it's been like a really great experience in getting people who it's like, I only know you as a recurring visitor of the Houndstooth. And it's like, yeah, it's been a heartening experience to be like, okay, there is actually like a desire for people to be like, yes, we will pay 10-20 bucks to come see a house show, because like there's people who appreciate what a rare thing it is. Yeah.
Nice. And what was some of that process? What was the process of this not being a venue to it being an idea to where it is now?
Yeah, we've lived in this house for, I want to say, just over 6 years now. So like, yeah, we've kind of had this big house and this space, and it's, I don't know, I've been playing music that whole time, and we've kind of built up this arsenal of instruments, and now I have like a full drum kit and all this stuff. And basically got to the point where I was like, if I buy a vocal amp, we've got enough stuff to have a venue. So it's just like, well, why don't we just take that final leap? And I was like, I'm in a band, we have a roommate who's in another band. It was just like, well, if all we have to do is find another band, I'm like, I know plenty. So it was kind of just like natural to be like, I feel like we haven't had to stretch to book too far. We have gotten a ton of bands that we aren't like personally friends with, but I'm like, feel like if I'm ever struggling to book someone, I'm like, okay, we've still got like 5 friends bands on a list where I'm like, this is the time we can tag them in. So it's, yeah, I feel like it hasn't been tough to book it since its inception. But yeah, it was kind of just like piecemeal building up our gear between every show, and like maybe this show we add some better lighting, or we'll take the feedback of bands where it's like the drumming stool is like everyone's about to fall off. So we're like, okay, slowly building it up. And yeah, I feel like when you're doing something DIY, it's about scalability and not like just being like, throw money that we don't have at it. I'm like, I wish I had unlimited funding, but it's just like choosing your battles and just being like, okay, we made $100 on this show. Next show, we're buying a smoke machine, and like kind of build it up to now it feels like we actually have a venue in our house. Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like it's been a really positive and like slow and steady growth. Yeah.
What have you learned?
Yeah, I think it's like still a learning process, but it's kind of just like learning to take feedback and like listening to the notes between the notes. And like, yeah, I feel like knowing that it's like, okay, I don't, especially doing this in like a residential neighborhood and a house, it's like, I don't want to burn out our neighbors or like kind of the neighborhood at large. So kind of figuring out the timing for like everyone who lives here, where it's like, okay, maybe every like 6 to 8 weeks is probably like the most we can do shows without like annoying the neighborhood. And so far we've never had any issues with the cops or anything like that. So yeah, just try. Yeah, I feel like the learning experience has mostly been around like pacing and trying to like monetize in a healthy way, in a way where it's like we're not like spending a ton of money that we're not going to earn back. Because I feel like a lot of people can put the cart before the horse and be like, oh, well, it'd be amazing if we did this and this and this. And it's like, okay, but then I don't want to do that at the sacrifice of like paying bands money. And like I want it to be a sustainable space. And I feel like I've seen some spaces fail where they're like, we're going to pay bands more than we can actually afford to, or we're going to like spend harder on like stuff that doesn't really matter, stuff that's secondary, where it's like, if the music's there and the bands and the artists and stuff are there, all the other stuff is just like extra, and it's awesome to have it, but it's like at the end of the day, I think getting cool, interesting performers is like what's going to keep people coming back and keeps me excited to put shows on. So like all the bells and whistles are fun, but it's like, yeah, definitely to the people thinking of starting something like this, it's like you can start really small. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so tell me about that starting, and how has it been to navigate that balance as well? Like, is this the first time you've been running events?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I feel like I was often like someone, I've almost always lived in houses and like thrown house parties, so it really started organically from us being like, we're like having a party and like having people over, and it'd be like my old drummer Max would just like get on drums, and I'd be like, all right, we're gonna play music for a half hour at this party and like have fun and not be like, everyone silence and stare at us, but it would be like an organic, like, we're gonna play some tunes we practice that are originals, and then like some friends will come up, jam with us, or sometimes it would just turn into like a full jam afterwards where everyone's just picking up any instrument they found, and just like, yeah, I've always enjoyed that vibe, and like having like putting the space to use when I've got it like a beautiful home. It's like I like to open it up, and finding a way to do that like, yeah, allows me to like play music. And yeah, I feel like it's nice for everyone in the band to be like, all right, we're not necessarily lugging gear all over town. It's like we're bringing a couple things to a friend's house, and yeah, I like that kind of impromptu vibe. So yeah, it really started from like, all right, let's see if people will be willing to pay $10 to see their friends play rather than seeing us for free. Because I'm like, if we can make a couple bucks, then it'll help us pay to get better and get all these other bands playing more music. And yeah, and luckily it seemed to work out.
Nice. Is there anything that you would do the same, or anything you would do different?
I feel like it's been like, I like the way it's gone so far. I'm like, I feel like we haven't like rushed to be like, we need to have a show every month, every Friday, and like we need to sell X amount of tickets. I think it's been like a really positive experience where everyone's kind of just like, yeah. I feel like don't know if I'd change much, but I'm like, I've definitely gotten better at knowing like how many, like, yeah, I feel like you learn like how many bands or artists make for like a full feeling night or a full feeling bill, or it's like starting to notice if like people are tiring out at a certain type of show. I'm like, okay, maybe we can move a little earlier. But yeah, I'd say it's been like not rough growing pains. It's like, yeah, it's been, yeah, I think we started from a sensible place of like trying to do something that we could sustain doing more than once. And I think it's like helped, it's paid off. And like, yeah, I think coming into further shows, like we've kind of redone our setup here. So the goal is to kind of do a little more merch and like, I think next show we might start testing recording band sets live here, and then do like next show you can buy the cassette of the last show that was here and try to do that like boutique, yeah, kind of like boutique merch and like something that is also like continuing to give back to the musicians who come here and be like, okay, now you've got an exclusive tape that you can either be like, we don't want anyone to ever hear this, or you can be like, great, we want to use this as merch, or throw this as our B-side on a single or something. I'm like, yeah, I'm just like into trying to get more weird, interesting stuff out there. So if we can help push a band who hasn't had anything recorded to like get something out there, I think that'd be really cool.
And how important is that personalized experience to you?
I feel like, yeah, the personalized experience is just, for me, is more about like curating stuff that I stand by, or like bands that I actually like or want people to hear. And like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to just be like, we're getting in some popular person because it'll bring in people. Because I'm like, that's almost like the one kind of dickish person we had in here. It's like, well, someone suggested them because they're kind of like popping off a little in their little scene. But I was like, I'd way rather just have someone with like a good attitude who I like having them and their friends who I've never met in this house and just like getting along than just trying to like get someone in here who might like help me make a quick buck. Because I'm like, I think people, especially at a venue like this, it's like the vibe is of the utmost importance, I feel like. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't have time for the big timers, especially when it's like, if you're playing in this house, it's like, you don't need to act like you're selling out arenas or something. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it's been a really positive experience overall, meeting a lot of artists who it's like, oh wow, you're really down to earth, and like, yeah, it's, yeah, and kind of like seeing it pay dividends. A year later, I'm playing with a band who's like friends with a band who played here a year ago. Like we just played a show at Green Auto, and it's like, yeah, that was awesome. And it's like, you kind of never know where these connections are going to lead. Or you were at one of our house shows as well, and it's kind of just like, yeah, by putting stuff on like this, it just like opens me up to like all these collisions with other cool artists where I'm like, I've talked with people who have done, like Marshall, who did some of the art here, might do a music video for us, and kind of just like, yeah, the opportunity to cross-pollinate with other artists. I'm like, feel like I am not even going to come to terms with how starting the Houndstooth has affected my life for like years to come. I feel like, so it's been a really interesting and, yeah, rewarding experience.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How has it affected you?
Yeah, I feel like it's like, it's funny because like just in like March, it was suddenly like we were getting reached out to by like Hugh for an interview, and like a crew that had been here for one show that were like, hey, we want to do like an old school like throwback to the blogs of the 2000s where we do like live music sets. They were like, do you want to come do one? And then it was like another band that was a friend of a friend asking us to do a show. So it was kind of just like, in a couple weeks, it was just like, whoa, like out of nowhere, this thing I've been doing for over a year, it's like, oh, it's like these seeds are starting to grow. And it's like, you kind of like, it's like there's people thinking about me, or I'm like, I had no idea I was on your mind. But it's like super cool that this thing I've kind of just been doing for fun is like affecting people, or like, yeah, people have positive experiences here enough that they want to keep the train rolling. And yeah, so it's been interesting, and like, yeah, even seeing bands work with each other who have been here, I'm like, oh, like you guys are now friends, like through an adjacent connection to here. It's like, yeah, it's really cool.
Great. This is a multi-pronged question, I guess. So one is, do you feel that the community has supported you in this, whether that's like other groups like yourself, whether that's the city, something, and if so, how? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I definitely have felt supported by like just like people like seeing posts on Instagram and like DMing people for the address and being like, we like music and like we thought this sounded cool. Like, yeah, our one show, I think a Vancouver like punk calendar or something like that on Instagram, like reposted the poster. So we kind of got like some weirder, like some goth people and a little more like metal type people and like random photographers. But it was like, yeah, everyone seemed like really keen to be like, okay, this isn't necessarily like a punk show, but they were like, oh yeah, we're like having fun and like talk, and like especially when it's like you're seeing these people who it's like are from total different walks of life, but they're in my living room all chatting together, and like it's very rare that like I've seen a group show up all together and they don't talk with anyone else. It's like that's the exception, where it's like more often than not it's like people are kind of mixing it up and getting out of their comfort zone in a way that's like really cool. And normally I'm just like mixing it up as the doorman and kind of making the rounds. So it's like, yeah, kind of on my feet trying to talk to everyone. And yeah.
If there is one thing that you would like support on, what would that be?
Um, I think we're trying to like expand out a little more. I think the hope would be to kind of do some like Houndstooth shows at other venues, or kind of expand out into different spaces and put shows on. And like we're kind of like in talks with like a vintage store to be like, can we use your upstairs to put on shows, and kind of like, yeah, start to try and take it on the road a little bit, and yeah, see if we can recreate the Houndstooth vibe outside of a house. But yeah, kind of definitely, yeah, the support factor I'd say is just like it's been really nice to see people show up again and again, or like people who run other underground venues have shown up and been like, oh, this is like really cool and we like your style, and like they're like, oh, we've done these things to improve our stuff, and like, are you guys thinking about that, and kind of trading notes a little bit. So I feel like the support's been really nice. But yeah, it would be nice to be a little more legit and like, yeah, because we are definitely living in that gray market realm. But the hopes would be to move to a more proper venue, and then we can kind of do more legitimate shows, and like maybe dabble into doing like some all ages shows and stuff where it's like, yeah, I don't know, I definitely don't want to like close off the vibe to anyone or anything. I definitely want to keep trying to think of how to expand the crowd and like make it inviting to everyone, because I don't want it to just be like you feel like you're going to any other venue in Vancouver. It's like I want you to get that the feeling that you're at a house party, or like that throwback vibe to a simpler time in your life when you're younger and mixing it up and meeting random people all the times.
Any interesting notes or secrets?
Yeah, I'd say it's like definitely like don't undervalue just being like a nice person, because it's like there's people you'll talk to who it's like, I have no idea if I'll ever see you again. But it's like if you're just like being honest and open and don't have a chip on your shoulder, it's like that person might end up being like someone you go on to work with for years if you keep yourself open to that connection. Like, yeah, I feel like it's really, yeah, you never know where it's gonna go. So it's like trying not to like be in a bad mood when you're putting on a art show or something. It's like, hey, we're all here to have fun, and yeah, yeah, keeping yourself open. And yeah, I feel like kindness definitely like I would way rather work with a kind person who's pretty good at something than like a jerk who's great at something. Like life's too short for assholes. So, yeah.
I remember this is early on in the interview, but you said something interesting. You said that there was someone who was a bit of a jerk, and then they went to go do karaoke, and you invited them into the space. And what does that mean to you, that invitation? Or what power do you think the space holds, or do you want it to have?
I've definitely been in that situation where you're at an event or something where it's like, I'm the one black person in a sea of white faces, or like, not even necessarily that. It can be more of like yeah, it doesn't have to be a racial thing necessarily, but it's like, I've been in that situation where I feel like I'm out of my comfort zone in a space where I'm not necessarily like, this isn't my normal vibe. So having someone to just like out outreach a hand to you and be like, come in and like you can be a part of the fun can really like make it so you're like stopping being like a wallflower and like really like loosen up and like have some fun and sing a song on karaoke and loosen up. And it's like, okay, suddenly this person who it's like, is there going to be an issue or something? And that's like, nope. Suddenly you're just like chilling and talking and like, yeah, I don't know. It's like not trying to be too cool for school or be too cool for anyone who's come here. It's like, if you've come here, you're putting yourself out there to come see and experience some weird art. I feel like, yeah, as like if you're here trying to experience it, I want to try and welcome you into the experience as much as possible, and yeah, not make you be like, oh, everyone's smoking weed, I feel weird about being sober, or like everyone's drinking. It's like, no, I've got some sodas and stuff if you need them. I've got snacks. So I'm like, yeah, trying to make sure everyone feels good, because I'm like, I definitely have had times where I've gone to shows and been like, left and been like, I have a weird feeling after that where I'm like, I don't really want to go back to that place, or like, I don't love the vibe of that, or yeah. So I'm like, definitely making sure, yeah, I don't know, very conscious of trying to make people feel good, and we're here to have fun. So I want it to be fun for everyone, not just fun for me. Yeah.
And that's such an interesting point. I feel like we talk a lot about safer spaces or accountable spaces, but people don't talk so much about uncomfortable spaces. Like, what happens if you go to a place for the first time and everyone is just in a clique, or you are the one like person of color,
Yeah.
and everyone else is different, or you're wearing clothes that don't fit in.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for your experience as someone who wanted to fit in potentially and then couldn't?
Yeah, there's definitely been times where I'm like, I feel like I need to leave this show halfway through, because I'm like, I'm just getting a weird flavor in the room. But it's like, sometimes all it takes is that one person to be like, hey man, that's funny, or like it's so like someone draws you in a little bit, and yeah, that's kind of can be all it takes, kind of. So trying to be conscious of those little things I can do to make people feel invited, and yeah.
Yeah, what do you think you or other people who run spaces and venues have, or obligation to people's level of comfort within?
I'd say like, yeah, there's definitely been some underground venues in Vancouver where it's like super sketch. Like there was one called 333 Glen where it was like, my friend was like, it would like open after shows on like a Friday or Saturday night, and my one friend was like a little too faded from the show we saw at the Biltmore, and she was like, can I get a glass of water? And they were like, oh, we actually don't have running water, like I can give you a beer. And I was like, that doesn't cut it. So I'm like, there's situations where I'm like, I never want to be that scrappy. I'm like, I want to be scrappy in a level where it's like, it still feels safe. Like if someone needs a glass of water, I think that should be doable. Or like, I feel like Green Auto is a really good space for that. Like my first time going there, I was like, the staff was really inviting. like I'd never been there and I was playing a show there and everyone was super nice and it's like a really cool space. So I feel like there are people who kind of get the vibe of like not just like banging the drum of we're into diversity or we're into this other stuff, but actually like walking the walk and being like, oh, if I'm seeing like artists of color and people of color and like trans, bi, gay people working there as like artists and staff and like comfortably in this space, then that usually is like, okay, I can breathe easy if I can see people from all walks of life going into a place. So I'm like, yeah, it's a little tough to define how to make it open to people, but I think it starts from like trying to not just curate one type of artist for your venue all the time, or like, I don't know, keeping yourself open to like other people's suggestions and yeah, I don't know, just yeah, I don't know, being open to people. I feel like it can be tough to define making a space open, but I think it like starts at like the vibe and like where your heart's at. If your heart's in the right place, I think it's easy to make a space that's open to everyone. You just have to be and have your ears and mind open to everyone as well, and not just be like, I always know what's right and what's the coolest. I'm like, hey, I'm always open to hear what someone thinks is cool and be proven wrong, or like, or be shown something I didn't find on my own. Yeah.
What do you think other venues are missing? And when I say that, I'm coming from an assumption that when you're creating this place, you're like, there's something. Maybe it is that feeling of being welcome. Maybe it's the like diversity of music and art within a night. But when you're thinking, there should be a space here that does this, what were you thinking other venues were missing, and do you think that has changed?
I definitely like one of the things I had in mind was like trying to like keep the artists in mind and be like, how can we do this in a way where we can support them and support like the continuing operation of us being a space where we can have people in. So I feel like it's trying to like not like gouge bands. I'm like, I don't need all the door money for me. I'm like, $100 for each band isn't a ton, but I'm like, that can go towards them recording and stuff like that. Or it's like you kind of hear about other venues like the Commodore, for example, is like a big venue on Granville Street, and it's like they'll take 50% of a band's merch that plays there, and I'm like, that's just like seems absolutely wrong to me. It's like you're already like like overcharging for tickets and like taking some cream off the top of that. It's definitely the type of venue where they're taking all of the bar and not giving that to any of the artists, and then you're also taking all the liquor money on top of that, and I'm like, I doubt that extra money's going to the staff. So I'm like, trying to make a space that feels like equitable to the artists was definitely in my mind. Seeing just like, yeah, I don't know, it's like, it's nice if we can all make a little something, but I don't need to be greedy. And I've kind of seen that greed backfire and turn really cool spaces into shitty spaces, or vice versa. I've seen like there was a really cool space in Edmonton I loved, where they kind of just paid bands beyond their means to actually pay them, to the point where they had to shut down. It's like, well, what good is this to the artists that you're paying them more if they no longer have a space to apply their trade? So I'm like, yeah, trying to be conscious of, yeah, making a space that artists would want to play in. It's like if I was a man just getting started out, this is the type of place I would want to play in myself. So trying to offer that up to others. Yeah.
Yeah, striking that balance.
Yeah.
What are some of the impacts that this space has had on people who visit it?
I'd say it's definitely like caused some cross pollination. Like there's kind of, I mentioned on one of the questions you asked me, not sure if this will all be in the same order, but there's like this crew of guys that showed up, friends of one band, and they kind of started this like throwback to the music blogs like La Blogo Tech and stuff like that, that they're just going to start doing like videos of bands playing in their like kind of weird jam space and put out 3 or 4 tracks. So kind of like seeing them start that up and being like, oh wow, they're almost like booking like the Houndstooth repertory group where it's like there's like a bunch of bands on there where it's like they've either played here or come to shows here, and just being like, okay, there's like you can see the threads being connected, and it's like, well, they might not have all met because of coming together here, but it's like definitely I've seen a lot of you talk in this house, and now getting to like watch videos that you guys have collabed on the internet, it's like, yeah, pretty cool. So it's like, yeah, definitely already made some connections in a pretty short time. So yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's been any other cool ones, or like, yeah, there's been like one person who's come to the shows is kind of repped as an actor by an agent who came to one of the shows. So there's definitely like, yeah, people of all walks of life come through. So you never know who's gonna talk to each other. Yeah, or even like, yeah, there's been weird stuff where like I love a band called The Organ. It's like an old Vancouver band that was like the Lady Smiths. It's almost like very cool music, and they only made an album or two. But like, weirdly, through putting on shows here, I met a woman who's like childhood friends with the lead singer, who like told me a bunch of stuff about them where it's like, oh my god, I'm like getting the happy ending to this band that I've like heard about their tortured breakup for years, so like getting some like closure on that. But then like this one dude was in town, saw a post on Instagram, he was in from the UK for like a couple nights, and was like, sure, I'll come to this random show. Shows up, and he was like, oh, like, what bands would you know from like 15 years ago when I lived here? Mentions The Organ as the first band. I was like, I love them. And he was like, I did their album art for their like first album. And I was like, my mind's blowing. And I'm like, this is crazy that like for some reason this is a hub for people who know this band I love to come through and tell me cool stories. So I'm like, yeah, it's been some weird stuff like that that's got me stoked. So yeah.
What are some of the achievements that you've gained, and what are some of the challenges you faced?
Achievements, I'd say, yeah, kind of just like getting like, I feel like we're starting to get a little rep in the music scene. It's like a band who's like tried to support other bands. So I'm like, I feel like it's kind of paying off in that way where it's like, oh, people like see that we're trying to like book shows and stuff. So I feel like people are starting to pay back the favor and try and get us on some shows, and vice versa. Or even like bands are like, oh, we played here, next show you do, you should have our friends play. So it's like, yeah, definitely that kind of, yeah, passing of baton between the scene has kind of been happening more and more frequently for us. So I'm like, yeah, I feel like that's been a good dividend achievement paying off of this. Challenges, yeah, I'd say it's definitely the biggest challenge we faced in recent times is like losing Alana, who was like a really great partner in putting on these shows. And like, I feel like she had a really good access to like a different kind of artist, of like the dancers, and like, yeah, and I feel like she was really plugged in like the queer scene as well, and brought in like an excellent trans DJ who's like actually jammed with our band outside of the shows and stuff. So it's like, yeah, it was tough to lose like such a great help in putting on these events, because yeah, she was right there with me cutting up cheese and putting out charcuterie boards and stuff for the parties. So yeah, but at the same time we've gotten new roommates in who are also musicians and stuff. So really keen to, yeah, take the challenge of rebranding the Houndstooth or relaunching it, and like trying to start it at a level that's even higher than the last show we've had. So
As people who are facilitating spaces like this, as a broader question, not just you but the wider community, what do you think you collectively should be paying attention to?
I think there's definitely, after COVID, I've noticed kind of a shrinking down in like the bigger spaces that exist within the city. Like it seems like there's fewer venues. So I think there almost is like a bit of a future, especially in a city like Vancouver where it's particularly hard to open a venue or a bar sometimes they'll really knock you around with the weird rules and stuff. So I think, yeah, just being open to alternate spaces like this, or like Redgate or like Green Auto, where it's like, okay, this might not be the Commodore Ballroom where you're spending $100 to be in this like really chic venue, but it's like, well, maybe it's more interesting to see like five bands that all play different stuff for $20 than spending $100 to see a band you've known for your whole life. So I think hopefully there will be a little more of a revolution of more niche spaces and like people being more into like supporting the arts in that kind of way. Because I'm like, yeah, I feel like there's like venues that are good for like the Spotify level artists and stuff, but I think having spaces like this where it's like support bands who it's like bands who are more plugged into selling like the almost the cottage industry of music where it's like we're selling our own homemade tapes and records and stuff, and like more of the record store bands where it's like trying to cater to people who care about physical media and that sort of thing. Because I think there is kind of a desire now to, yeah, I feel like culture is kind of coming back around to like, actually, there is something to tapes and like these physical medias and records and stuff like that. So I think there is going to be a desire to go to spaces that reflect that tangibility. So I think I'm excited and hopeful for like the future of music and movies and stuff like that. The fact that it's like kids are going back to like Blu-rays and DVDs because they're like, actually, Netflix got stuff can be kind of boring, or like Spotify's just pushing me the same stuff, so I actually need to like dig through some records at a record store or tapes or something and find some weird stuff that's off the beaten path. Because yeah, I'm like, I feel like that hunger is there for the audience, so I think I'm hopeful that people will cater to it wisely and yeah, not betray people's like curiosity. And like when people go looking for something good, I hope you've got something good to show them if you're opening your own venue.
Nice. I did say that was the last question,
Yeah.
but you put it awesome that I just wanted to like bring up quickly because it's interesting and specific to here. You said that Vancouver has some weird rules.
Yeah.
What are some of those weird rules for you back?
I feel like there's a lot of weird stuff around like selling of alcohol and like weird stuff around like games within a bar setting. So it's like it's really hard to open like a bar arcade type thing here, or even like, yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of venues where it's been like, yeah, they've just been caught up in weird red tape. Or like recently I had a buddy who was trying to put on his own wrestling event, and they were like, and it's like they were kind of giving him like forms to fill out and like stuff to pay for, where it's like, well, you're obviously putting on a sporting event. Like they were trying to treat it like he was putting on like a private boxing event, and he's like, this is like a performance. This isn't like people trying to actually hurt each other. These are people like, it's wrestling and it's a physical thing, but it's like, I feel like in Vancouver there's a lot of like, this is the way it's written in these bylaws, so there is no flexibility to this, and it's almost like necessitated stuff like this to open up to compensate for like idiocy within the government. Or like, yeah, I feel like all you have to do is follow like the Rio Theater on Instagram to be like, it's almost like once a quarter they're going through some weird bullshit where it's like, we're being told we can't screen this movie, or like pushed out by a bigger company so we can't show this movie or this type of thing. And it's like often the city doesn't really seem to support them in a big way, where it's like, I feel like, yeah, Vancouver is like particularly known for being shitty in that regard, whereas it's like Toronto and Montreal, it's just like live venues freaking everywhere. And it's just like, yeah, I was in New Orleans last fall, and it was just like, you're walking down a street and it's like, there's really cool sounding jazz coming from this way, really cool sounding funk here, really cool rock on the same block. And it's just like, I can't even imagine a Vancouver where something like that exists, where it's like, yeah, it feels like they almost want it to be a little more polished than it should be, or like, I don't know, I think their standards are a little too high in Vancouver, where it's like they loosen the grip a little bit, because a lot of it I feel like was a knee-jerk reaction from like the downtown east side getting out of hand in the city government's eyes. So I think they were just like, we need to tamp down on liquor license and not just anyone can open a bar and blah blah blah. And it's like, I think they saw a problem and tried to address it in like the complete wrong way, and the result has been like, well, like they're like attacking or like trying to put a cap on the number of spaces that can exist for like people who live in the downtown east side. But it's like, well, that also affects like the starving artists and like, I don't know, like the broke young people and like students and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, people go to like dive bars when they're young and broke, and kind of that's where a lot of culture gets shared. But it's like, if you're making it so like, no, to open a bar it has to be like a fancy Gastown or Yaletown bar, and well, it's like, okay, then you're pricing certain people out or like excluding them monetarily or class wise. It's like there's a very different vibe from like people going to a show on Commercial Drive than people going to a show on Granville Street. So it's like the fact where it's like, I don't want places like the Biltmore to kind of turn into a more Granville Street style venue, when it's like, that was like a Heart of East Van, like you can go see a banging show for $10 on a weeknight and like have a good time. And it's like, I don't want to see that disappear, because yeah, I feel like it's phasing people out of the scene for no reason. And I feel like that's where I got a lot of my most inspiring artistic experiences, was these little slapdash shows where it's like you pay $10 and you don't know what you're gonna get. So
Great, thank you so much.
oh, thank you.